Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast. As always, I am your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, I have returning guest to the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast, Ian Benouis. He is one of the founders of the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, which produces a novel psychedelic compound, Psilomethoxin, 4-HO5-MeO-DMT. The church has been subject of controversy ever since they first opened up, and Ian is back on the podcast to share, yet again, the latest scientific findings around evidence for Psilomethoxin in their specially produced mushrooms. We had a conversation a couple years ago when there was an initial confirmation of Psilomethoxin. They have now gone through an even more rigorous process of detecting Psilomethoxin, and the evidence seems to indicate that it's there and has been there all along. Now, I like to give the disclaimer. I myself am not a chemist. I am not a scientist. I do not know about how the work of these machines really works and what they can confirm and what they can't confirm. So just putting that out there, that I myself am not an expert in this matter, but I do think that it's important to give Ian the space to share these latest findings because this is scientific research and it is something that they have been accused of being frauds and misleading the public. And the evidence seems to be accumulating that they've been pretty much straight up telling the truth the entire time. So Ian is back on the podcast to talk about that today. We will get into that in just a moment, but first a few announcements. A reminder, yet again, that my next 5-MeO-DMT integration specialist training course with Mindscape Institute is starting in just over a month. It's a 9-week course. It meets on Wednesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. First class is on September 9th. The class is now just a little bit more than half full. There's 15 spots in the class. 8 have already been claimed. So that means there's still room for you. If you would like to vastly increase your knowledge about the phenomenology of 5-MeO-DMT and what clients who are seeking integration with 5-MeO-DMT experiences are looking for and how best to meet them and help them, if you are a facilitator, if you are a guide, if you're an integration specialist, if you are a therapist, this class is for you. It is rigorous, it is informative, and it sets you up with all the skills you need basically to open up shop as, like myself, a professional 5-MeO-DMT integration specialist working with clients, coming to you with profound, powerful, and sometimes difficult and challenging experiences with 5-MeO-DMT. Now, if you want to learn more about this, of course, you can just stop by my webpage at martinball.net/courses. Or you can sign up for my next free webinar that I'm going to be offering on exactly this topic. I held one of these last month and went over very well. Looking forward to doing it again. The next one is scheduled for Wednesday, August 19th. It's pretty much 3 weeks before the class starts, so it still gives you time to learn about the class and then sign up for it, assuming that there will still be spots available at that point. But this is a free webinar. It's going to be hosted on Zoom. If you want to join, you do need to register at my website. So martinball.net/webinar. Enter your information, and that will get you the Zoom link and everything that you need to know to participate in this webinar. And just like the last one, this is going to be recorded and made available as a video for anyone who registered for the event. So it's not a publicly available video. It's just for people who have registered. Now, a little bit more news for you out there in the listening audience. Of course, I do these long-form interviews with guests here on the podcast. Most interviews are around an hour and a half long, and I know that that's a long time to sit around and listen to something. So in order to make at least little snippets more available to people, I have set up a new playlist on the Entheogenic Evolution YouTube channel that I'm calling Psychedelic Firsts. And what I've done is I've gone through, I think, at least 30 interviews now, and I still have more to go. And I've found the portions where my guests tell me about their very first psychedelic experience or what brought them into the world of psychedelics and psychedelic medicine and therapy and transformation and spirituality, etc., etc., etc. And I've made short clips clips of those and put them into this playlist. So if you want to check it out, it's at the Entheogenic Evolution on YouTube, and the playlist is Psychedelic Firsts. Guests of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast share their first psychedelic experience. And those are all around, 3 to maybe 5 minutes long in length. So I invite you to check that out. And one last bit of news that I want to share with you is I'm happy to report that after 5 months of working on it, which really was just an extraordinarily long time, primarily because I've been rather busy and haven't had a lot of free time. But after 5 months, I have finally finished recording all of the audio for the Fifth Temple, which is book number 4 in the Tales of Ardawen series, comes up next after The Alchemist and the Eagle. So that is now officially done. I'm very happy to report next on the list is to create a soundtrack of original instrumental music to go with the audiobook, just as I have done for the other 3 audiobooks in the series. So it's not ready yet, but I've reached that important milestone and just wanted to share it with you, the listening audience. Okay, that's it for announcements. Let's get into the conversation with Ian Benouis from the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, sharing with us the latest scientific evidence regarding the existence of Psilomethoxin within their mushrooms, and also where the Church is at in various court cases that it has brought over defamation and slandering of the Church, calling them frauds, calling them fakes. Yet the scientific evidence, again, really is supporting that it's there. Psilomethoxin is there. And so all these reports of it not being there don't seem to be scientifically accurate. Again, I'm not a scientist, just sharing the information. Here's my conversation with Ian. We held this about a month ago. Hope you enjoy. Be back next week with another selection from The Alchemist and the Eagle audiobook, and then more interviews after that. Well, I'm welcoming back to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today Ian Benouis, who's been on the podcast before, talking about religious freedom, talking about Psilomethoxin, talking about the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, and I think we're going to be talking more about all of these topics again today. Ian, welcome back. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Yeah, I think it was maybe 2 years ago was our last conversation.
Yeah, that sounds right. Exactly after the University of South Florida data came out with me and Adam.
Yeah. Had you and Adam on here. So the world has changed. The world has moved on. We're living in a completely different reality today than we were just a few years ago with our pathological narcissist megalomania, totally fucked up, insane thief in the White House. And the entire country has been taken over by a radical cult of total fucking idiots. Just a little social commentary there.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
But that's so we're in a different world, man. But it's great to have you back on, and let's just start with a bunch of things I want to talk to you about today. Yeah. But let's start with the latest confirmation of Psilomethoxin, and maybe we can just start again with what is Psilomethoxin, how does this come into existence, and then let's get into the science. And also, like last time when I had you on, just recognizing I'm not a chemist, I'm not a scientist, I don't speak that language, but this is still something that we need to discuss publicly because of the history that we will get into here. So,
absolutely. Yeah, and so that's why I kind of asked also about video before, right? The podcast, because I am going to offer and use my molecule at some points just to be able to.
Yeah, maybe put it down in front of your shirt. Yeah, so that it.
Oh, I see. I'm seeing a smaller view of myself. That's okay. I get you. So if I'm down here,
yeah. Well, if it's up too high, then the background blurring takes it out.
Got to be in front of myself. Okay, and I'm just offering Okay, so this is a molecule of Psilomethoxin, which is 4OH, 5-MeO, DMT, and this molecule, I see what you're saying, was given to me by Bill Atkinson. And you know who Bill Atkinson is, of course.
Yes, I do.
5-MeO practitioner for over 20 years, and the person who invented the HyperCard, which is the precursor to the hyperlink and the graphical user interface for Mac. And yeah, he really he was a God. He's a godfather. God bless him in our church of in that way, just like you, someone who uh, took on the sacrament and worked with it and gave you really useful feedback. And he's like, yeah, this is basically, the equivalent effect of oral 5-MeO. So, okay,
Yeah.
so the history of Psilomethoxin.
Wait.
Yeah, go.
Since you mentioned Bill, I just
Yeah.
want to add in there that he's also the person that originally designed and invented
Yeah,
how to
yeah,
make 5-MeO DMT vape pens, and that he put that
exactly.
information online under a pseudonym, and recommended that graduated vape pens of the low dose, medium dose, and
Yeah,
high dose. And he, in particular, was very fond of low dose use for meditation and nervous system regulation and just vibing in, but at a low dose. So, because of Bill's work, that has made 5-MeO DMT vape pens possible.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And should we mention his partner in crime, who's passed, or as far as the collaboration around the vape pens? Anyway, there's other wizards that are involved with these good things too. And yeah, without Bill Atkinson, there's no light wands that our church offers as well. So yeah, God bless Bill. And yeah, he just like, well, he worked with our sacrament at 60 milligrams, 120 milligrams, 180, 300, and just did all the good dieta style dosing to give people really useful feedback on how to work with it. So okay, so I was going to kind of give the sort of history of Psilomethoxin. So
Yeah.
the history of Psilomethoxin, well, we'll slide back into it, Maria Sabina and Albert Hofmann stuff. But in 1965, Mark Julia, who's basically the top French chemist ever, synthesized Psilomethoxin from the Mexican vanilla orchid, from which he extracted orthovanillin. So orthovanillin was the starting material. And he did this 10-step process to make it. So it wasn't just to make Psilomethoxin at the end, it was to make all the different intermediates in between to show these tryptamine synthesis steps, right? Except that, so when he synthesized this in that 10th step, so if you start with 10 grams, you end up with a gram at the end, but kind of way to think about it. And so he synthesized this, and when he did so, it it basically oxidized, because it's just like psilocin. If it's exposed to oxygen, it begins to break down really fast. So he didn't preserve it. He didn't potentially know that he needed to preserve it, right? And so there was no reference standard. There was no, anything to bioassay or anything else. Okay, so he didn't know, and this is to go back to other godfathers and mothers of our church, Maria Sabina, Albert Hofmann. Gordon Wasson went to Mexico, got the mushrooms from Maria Sabina. He brought them back, gave them to Albert Hofmann. That allowed Albert Hofmann to extract out psilocin and psilocybin from the mushrooms, and then that's what allowed him to synthesize psilocin. And his magic that all these pharmaceutical companies are still riding on was that he knew and understood how to preserve psilocin when he synthesized it, right? 4-hydroxyl DMT, by putting the phosphoryl cap on it, the phosphate. So that's his magic that he figured out, and that's why he was able to preserve the psilocybin to then, in effect, preserve the psilocin, because psilocybin is the psilocin prodrug. Except that even though that was written in a peer-reviewed public journal in 1959, Mark Julia never read it in France by 1965. So he didn't know that he could have phosphate buffered his psilomethoxin and made it into psilomethoxibin, or 5-methoxy psilocybin, if you like. That would have worked, and it does work. So he didn't do that. And so then Joachim Gartz, that way another godfather of our church, was the East German mycologist who fed DET and DPT and other tryptamines, right, to the mushroom substrate, and they mushroom substrate 4-hydroxylated both natural and synthetic tryptamines and made those four hydroxylated versions, right? And then 4 phosphorylated with the phosphate group on it. So he had patents on that. So he just proved out that the mushroom substrate was flexible to work on, that the mushroom's enzyme was flexible for different substrates.
Mm.
And so then on my birthday in 2005, so it was printed a question someone asked Sasha Shulgin. We all know who he is. I got to meet him a number of times and hang out with him and Ann. And someone asked him, how come Psilomethoxin isn't in your book, Tryptamines I've Known and Loved, TCAL? And he said, well, it's a really interesting thing. It's never been, preserved. But he basically put a Shulgin treasure map in there. And since you've read his books, they're all recipes and they're highly technical, right? Whether you're a expert in the field or not. And so by putting what he did in there, it was more like a treasure map where he said, I'll give you 50-50 odds that if you put mushroom spores, 5-MeO-DMT, and cow manure, that you'll make Psilomethoxin. And then he has an entry in the DET section in TCAL, which talks about the Joking guards and the Mickey Mouse ears, and he calls the enzyme Mickey Mouse ears, that it'll put on the 4-hydroxyl into anything that has that position open. It'll do that. It'll do it on Mickey Mouse. So I smoked 5-MeO-DMT for the first time back when it was legal in 1995 with my my brother who's a veteran, and put it on the shelf after they had that just sublimation experience, because I'm like, I didn't know where to put that in the community. So when I came back to the 5-MeO synthetic before getting access to the toad in like 2015, right? Where was I trying to go? I'm trying to remember now. Sorry. I was saying, help me there. Let's see.
I think you're getting into the idea to actually synthesize it, biosynthesize it through the
Thanks.
mushroom.
Yeah, thanks. So when I got back into it, I'm like, this is great. I went down to, Mission Within, patient number 1 in Mexico, right? And had second person planet that we had before and after brain scans with 5-MeO-DMT and Iboga. And I was like, okay, so working with it on myself for a while, working with other people, serving other people, I said, this is fantastic. The unity consciousness is amazing. Yet how do I get into the afterglow effect, right, without having to go on the Six Flags ride to start? So I was like, how do I get oral 5-MeO? And so I said, if nature can take, DMT, right? If you decarb tryptophan, it decarbs into tryptamine. And if you put the 2 methyl groups there on the end, then you have DMT. So if you put this in your gut, or I put it in my gut, well, it gets broken down by monoamine oxidase. Except if we put nature puts a 4-hydroxyl group in there, what happens is it's slightly negative here and slightly negative over here, and they form what's called a zwitterionic bond where they attract to themselves. And then that little attraction prevents the enzyme from coming in there on the monoamine oxidase and cutting it, okay? So I said, if nature makes DMT orally active by 4-hydroxylating it, will that work for 5-MeO-DMT? That was my question. I just want, because I'm like, this 5-HT2 activation from 5-MeO-DMT is fantastic. What other versions of it are there out there? I was a pharmaceutical rep for Pfizer after I got in the Army, and we had a drug. Well, I didn't have Procardia. I had Procardia XL. Procardia was for like angina, heart attacks, too strong at once for blood pressure, right? But they put it in a pill that squirted it out for 24 hours. So they just basically got this nice, super flat, kind of blood curve. And so I'd already come from some of that background. I'm like, how do I do this with 5-MeO? So Psilomethoxin is the answer. And that's how I found the recipe. And then from there, I had someone, who was our grower for our church, put 5-MeO-DMT that I got into the water. It was basically being fed to the mushrooms. And so we tested it through bioassay on ourselves, did like a 5-day diet, myself and Benjamin Moore from the church and Ryan Began and his wife now, Kayla. And it worked. And you could stack it on top of each other. So there was no tolerance. And we're like, this is all 5-HT1A effect. So then at that point, we shared it with our, head wizard friends like you and other people that other people know, like Rock Razam and Joe Barsuglia. And bunch of other people, and they all gave the same thing of like, oral 5-MeO type of effect, separate from, what's exactly the constituents. So that was enough to then do a soft launch, shared with about 2,000 people. They could sign up, and then we went public after that. And then, I'm starting to get sort of into the legal stuff, but this is, I guess, still all part of the story of Psilomethoxin. But then, the abbreviated version, we got attacked through fungi fiction, and everything was called into question of like, were we telling the truth or not? And we had done one test at the University of South Florida, and it measured, the molar mass of 235.15. Arguably, it's legitimate. That's not specific enough to determine. It could be 10 to 20 different molecules. Does that make sense at that weight? When you basically take all these little pieces, right, and you add up their weight, and then they shoot extra positive energy protons in there to make it so it's going to break apart. And so you can measure the fragments, but they then measure that weight with that extra in there, and that's a molar mass. And so that wasn't good enough, and that was fair, a fair critique. So that told us that we needed to get access to a better machine that could prove it, and that's what we did. We got access to the top machine on the planet. I think I said in the last podcast there's 20 of them. There's maybe up to 50, but it's a $1.4 million machine, Thermotrap, a Thermo Scientific Orbitrap Fusion Lumos hybrid with a UHPLC front end to it. And so it can get resolution further down the sequence of numbers, 2 more places. And when you can get down 2 more places of the data, like we measured at ours at 235.1456, the molar mass is 235.146. That's 10 Daltons. And that's like not even 4 parts per million, and you can have up to 20 parts per million error. There's only 4 things it can be, okay? The number one that they tried to say in fungi fiction is 5-MeO DMT nitric oxide, aka 5-MeO DMT gets oxidized in the air. The fragment that 5-MeO breaks down into isn't in our sample, so that's immediately removed, okay? So then the other things, this is where the story gets really totally freaky and crazy, because the other things it can be are that 4 for the 5-MeO DMT, or the 6 or the 7, the ortho and the meta. Okay, so check it out. So I got the data from Jesse Hines, who's one of the top mass spec guys in the country, and ran our data there in Alabama. And so in December, so he's run it 13 times and found Psilomethoxin at that same weight every single time. May have machines that weren't as the highest same resolution, but he's found it over 12 times. So in December, he said, "Hey, I found it on the Thermo Scientific," and I said, "Wonderful." I got my affidavit I needed legally wise, and I drove back my widower father's and an hour away from Birmingham, basically. So I drove back to Texas, and I was like, no, because this was going to start the research. And so I'm sitting there doing the research, and I wanted to read all these studies about how to make psilocybin synthetically and make it from yeast and bacteria and all this kind of stuff that I'm into, and reading on. I have these 2 Bufo studies, Schwelm from 2021 and Lucioni from 2025, where they looked at the constituents of the Bufo alvarius toad gland. And guess what they tentatively identified? They identified the 6 and the 7 5-MeO DMT.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, dude, I have now, in my own movie, I said, wow, I got this data from Jesse, but I still have to have this stupid NMR and reference standard to prove my stuff. I'm like, that's the lame ass movie that I really don't want to be in. And with this other orthogonal data that establishes this, I don't have to live in that movie, because now you have to either accept that Psilomethoxin is in our sacrament or it's in the toad. So take your pick. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're left with.
Because
does that make sense?
Because the numbers come out the same.
Yes, there's only 3 things that are not 5-MeO DMT nitric oxide, and that's the 4, 6, or 7 isomers of 5-MeO DMT, hydroxylated isomers of 5-MeO DMT.
Okay, and all this then is it's complicated by the fact that if I understand this correctly, is because there's not a standard reference because this is a purely synthetic molecule, though, and
Well,
no
it's
one.
a well. I wouldn't use the word synthetic, but it's not well, it can be made naturally occurring, but it can be
Okay,
made synthetically as well. So
right. So yeah, I guess I shouldn't say synthetic because it could, as we say, it could be the 7 or the 9, right, and not
well, 6 or 7, but it could also
6
be
or 7.
made in the mushroom more biologically, or it could be made in the lab
Right.
synthetically.
But
So yeah,
yeah, but the point I was trying to make is that there
yeah.
there hasn't been a stable sample that then is the
Yes,
reference point where then
yep,
when we could say, just very simply, we can take one molecule, put it up like, oh yeah, these are a match, right? Because
yes,
it hasn't existed independently before that anyone has been able to verify. So this is what has complicated this process because
yes,
the bioassay. So for any, we talked about this last time, but anybody who's not familiar with the term, bioassay means you ingest it and then you give your assessment of what you think this is or what that experience was. And so when you passed out the early samples of the Psilomethoxin mushrooms, like you guys sent me some, I ate them, and my opinion from that was these are distinctly different from psilocybin mushrooms. This is not like any psilocybin mushroom I've ever consumed before. Now, that's not a scientific assessment. That's a subjective assessment by doing the bioassay, right? So
amen.
that's what leads us to think there's probably something different in here. And also, my opinion was, yeah, this does seem like 5-MeO, but kind of slowed down, stretched out, and certainly not the same level of intensity as, say, vaporizing 5-MeO,
Amen.
right?
Yeah,
So this is, to me, this appears like 5-MeO just in a different format. In the same way that I would say, for me, psilocybin mushrooms or even ayahuasca is primarily a DMT experience, but it's just stretched out. It's longer. It's not as intense. It's not as overwhelming as just smoking or vaporizing DMT. But
yeah,
from the phenomenological perspective, in terms of what do things look like? What does it feel like? What kind of phenomena arise within the experience? We could say, yeah, mushrooms and DMT, they are clearly related to each other.
yeah.
Okay. So that's what we're talking about here with the bioassay. And so then it's the difficulty of identifying a novel compound for which there is no reference. So we can't just go look in the books and say, okay, yeah, this is that because it's never been documented before, right? So that's a scientific question. It's a scientific problem, and it requires scientific material and research and experimentation in order to derive a really solid answer. And as you're saying here, that it boils down to three possibilities.
Yes. Well, four, but one's automatically eliminated.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
then you're left with those three because there's no other combination of molecules that weighs
Yeah.
that number.
So with this more recent assessment in the very expensive machine that has a very long name that I'm not going to repeat because I'm not able to repeat it. Tell us what is the difference between this assessment that was made with a very expensive machine versus when you and Adam were on a couple years ago? What does this add to what Adam had already done, and how might this be different? So, for those who are
Yeah,
still skeptical, saying, "No,
yeah,
you guys haven't done it,"
yeah.
what's the value added of going to this next step of
Sure.
the expensive machine?
Sure. Well, it's just like I said, that resolution of data places that allows you to take the pool from 10 to 20 down to those four. And in those older kinds of processes, machines, approaches, you're doing things like gas chromatography where you're blowing stuff up and then looking at the splatter patterns. In this Orbitrap machine, you're energizing the stuff and then you're spinning it around at a million times in like an orbit, right inside like a little mini universe you've made. And then you can measure it over and over again. So in that way, it's not a destructive test. And then you can isolate the substances and then you can isolate their fragments. And that's something you really can't do in these other machines because they're sort of one-time splatter pattern. I blow something up and I look at the pictures, whereas this Orbitrap, you're trapping the things and then you can measure them a bunch and then you can then energize those and break them into further fragments. And then you can see fragments of things that can only come from one molecule. In other words, the joke I make is if I blew you up, I would be, both got blown up, we'd be able to tell whose body was what from our different pieces. You know what I'm saying? Because you have a certain length arm and a certain length leg.
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing with these fragments, right? So there's a fragment of psilomethoxin that preserves the 4-hydroxy and 5-hydroxy skeleton off that tryptamine, right? That it doesn't exist. So you have numbers like, you have a number like 219 for 5-MeO-DMT nitric oxide. It's not found in any of our numbers. You have a number that we have for psilomethoxin, 164, okay? But that's not found in the Schwelm studies, which is those two isomers both break down into 162. You feel me? So you got all these different pieces. So we have another one, it's at 118. There's no 118 that the 6 or the 7 5-MeO breaks down into. And the numbers I'm giving are all just molecular, the mass, to energy ratios. But yeah, so
yeah,
I'm just trying to keep all the scientific stuff from like blowing out of my head at one time while I'm talking about it. But yeah, so then it becomes orthogonal proof, which guess what? Before we never had reference standards and NMR, okay? And orthogonal proof says the Supreme Court is the best thing. And orthogonal just means 90 degrees. So you're proving it not by direct pushing on it. So it's basically like, you take these different things and they can only break down into different subpatterns, and those are not identical at all. So they're both exclusive and not any kind of there's individual exclusivities that are definitive. And then you have these two studies, which that's how you get there. And then these studies, and we can talk about this more, those studies show the faulty methodology used by Usona et al. To come up with their results.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because there's other studies that show how to do this right if you're going to find these more trace kinds of substances in there.
Okay. So now we're going to get a little bit more into the history of the Church of the Sacred Synthesis. So we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. And hopefully for those who are still on the scientific skeptic side, that again, I'm not a chemist, so I can't speak to the validity of what you're saying here. But hopefully for those who are literate in chemistry, that this provides what they're looking for in terms of confirmation. Because again, the bioassay is not a scientific confirmation. That's a subjective phenomenological confirmation. So that's different.
These folks have to accept, if they understand and they believe in the truth, that psilomethoxin is in our stuff or it's in toad. That's the only possibility. And it can't be in the toad because when you look at the fragments that are in the toad, they're totally different than the fragments that are in psilomethoxin. So you can still, someone could be skeptical, but here's the point, okay? Before there was no reference standards, before there was no, NMR. NMR is just a way where you can shoot like radio waves over the molecule. Just like when you have it climb a column, the different way the stuff's laid out affects how fast it moves, and that's called retention time, okay? And when you do the NMR, you can tell where the hydroxyl group is by the weight. You know what I mean? Where it's at in the molecule, okay? We came close. When Adam was on the show, Adam had created 4 and 6 hydroxy 5-MeO-DMT in a container that also had cyanide in it as part of a byproduct, and you could get only to 60% purity, but you need to get it to 70 to be able to run it in NMR. But it's sort of a thing where when there's a certain test that you can do becomes the standard, then they try to say, well, it has to apply to everything. NMR really works for purely synthetic molecules, but it doesn't really work as well to be able to get these naturally occurring substances, right? To be able to test them that way. So it created a false standard, and there's other ways to prove it. So anyway, that's where we're at. So
okay, well, thanks for that, Ian. So then now to shift a little bit more into the story of the church. So you and your fellows, Benjamin, let's see who else, Greg,
Jenna, Amy, Ryan, Bacon,
So
Kayla,
you guys originally formed the Church of Psilomethoxin, and
yes, sir.
Then And here's something that I think has been
Well,
widely.
let's get it all right, because people like to argue about this internet because they got nothing better to do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first name of our church, the legal name of our church, is the Church of the Sacred Synthesis. Okay. Not the other way around, the way everyone tries to talk about it when they're trying to attack us. And we didn't change our name because of the fungi fiction article. We were going to go under the banner of the back to the church original name, Church of Sacred Synthesis, at entheogenesis. The point of the Church of Psilomethoxin was, if we don't have a church name that tells somebody something in our church, I'm an IP attorney, lots of experience with trademarks. Why wouldn't you use something that's going to help people? They're like, oh, the Church of Psilomethoxin. That's like the Church of the Holy Eucharist or whatever their sacrament is. So, yeah, we formed that church and gave ourselves a couple of assumed names to play around with.
Yeah. So this is the first point that I wanted to make, is that it has been widely and consistently misreported about the timeline here. And a lot of stink has been made about this misreported timeline. So if you just indulge me for a second, I'm just going to lay it out. So you guys had the entheogenesis event, which was kind of like your public launch in a sense of a community public event. This was held in Austin, Texas, and I was invited to that. And I didn't know that the church started with the name Church of the Sacred Synthesis. By the time you guys had sent me the samples, it was Church of Psilomethoxin. But when I arrived in Texas, the swag, the gift bags, and like I still have my water bottle. It said the Church.
That's the proof. The water bottle's the proof.
Yeah, it was the Church of the Sacred Synthesis.
Yeah,
and that was on a Thursday that I arrived, and then it was either that day or the next day that the fungus fiction, whatever the name they put on it was, this article came out that said, we've tested this sacrament and it's not in there. This is like from USONA.
Yeah.
And one of the accusations that was made was, because we tested it and we didn't find Psilomethoxin, these fraudsters changed the name of their church. And this has been repeated again and again and again and again as, quote, evidence that you guys were trying to pull one over on someone or everyone. But the timeline doesn't work. And I think it really highlights, unfortunately, how much really shoddy investigation and reporting has been done around this whole thing. This created a massive controversy just when you guys were trying to have your kind of public launch and opening.
It was intentional. Yeah, exactly. The timing was completely intentional.
Yeah. And another thing that I pointed out at the time that really struck me was that USONA released this information formatted as though it were a peer-reviewed scientific study. And I think that this was very misleading. So they put it out as a scientifically peer-reviewed document. So it had all the same format. So if you just look at it, it looks like something that's in a scientific journal. However, it was not peer-reviewed.
Exactly. And had a disclaimer with it that was required to be associated with any kind of republication of it. It was not being honored by nobody.
Yeah. So it created a lot of backlash. It created a big stir in the psychedelic world, a lot of criticisms. And generally the story that got put out there was, these guys are frauds. They're just in it for the money. They're looking to rip people off. The whole church thing is just a front. It's just a fraud. And that these people need to be ostracized. They need to be called out and ostracized. So what is the story now of how did USONA get these samples? And according to the more recent data that you've been able to muster through these scientific studies, what was done wrong?
Sure. Well, the first wrong is that Hamilton Morris sent USONA and Kaikian, and we don't know anyone else, but unauthorized samples of the sacrament that I'd provided to him in two separate iterations. Yeah. So their initial access was unauthorized and tainted from the start. And had no chain of custody that it could enable them to legally or scientifically publish anything that anyone else would not be able to attack for that reason, right? Because they didn't protect and authenticate the transmission of the samples along the process. So yeah, I looked at Hamilton. I'd met Hamilton at the let's see, Maps in Oakland was what 2018, right? And then again in World Buffalo Area Conference in 2019, and other times. And so, okay, Hamilton, at least he plays a chemist on television, so maybe he can test my stuff. And so I sent it to him, and yeah, he came back and said inconclusive tryptamines. And then we got it to another bunch more batches. This is, months later. This is all, and I have all the screenshots. You can go look at this on my website, Psychedelic Musulman, and see our whole back and forth. And the second time, I still really remember we opened the packages, cut it, bioassayed it, closed it back up, took some out of it, closed it back up, and did that with two separate batches and sent it to him. And this is the stuff that he says he found ketamine, only ketamine in it, which is impossible, okay? It's impossible to test ketamine and find only ketamine.
How so?
Okay. Because there's no sample that's not contaminated by something else. It's just not possible. In other words, I guess if you go to Roche or any of these companies, you know what I mean, and you get up in there, and maybe you find some binders and other stuff in there, but you don't see those kinds of mass spec results because there's always other stuff in there, because there's the versions of the main molecule that are right there breaking down slowly into other metabolites. It's just, you never see a picture where there's one thing in there. There's no substance, there's no sample like that's pure, that pure. I mean, you could try to make one like that, you feel me? But they don't occur in the normal course of normal transactions. It's just not a thing. It's a term that I learned from Jesse Hines that I'd never heard before, called dry labbing. Had you heard of that?
No.
Okay, so dry labbing is when they fake results. And since all the government drug laws are based on presence and not potency, they can get away with basically, they catch you with this much weed, right? And they call it a Dragon Ball. And they say they get the claim in Texas it's pure THC. So all they got to find is one THC molecule in there, and then they get to say the thing is all THC. So yeah, we were just the ketamine report is dry labbing. It's just basically made up pseudoscience to
But where exactly did that claim of ketamine originate? Was that USONA or
that was Hamilton? But the same. Well, okay. This is part of the story. This just needs to come out. So if you look at fungi fiction, in the picture, it has capsules. Okay. So the only people that got capsules were basically Hamilton Morris, because all the people that bought our stuff got powder. Okay. Capsules is only a more recent thing. So when they say, oh, we got the sample for fungi fiction from an anonymous church member, and they have a picture of capsules, those are the capsules that I sent to Hamilton, because Hamilton was the only guy that had those capsules. That's what I'm saying. And so when they take the picture, they're incriminating themselves by showing where they got it from. So when I sent Hamilton the first round that he came up with the unknown tryptamines, those are the capsules that he sent to USONA.
So Hamilton and I mean, we've never really had a conversation. We've had a couple brief email exchanges. So I don't personally know him. I've never been able to ask him about anything about this. But so just putting myself in Hamilton's shoes, I'm kind of imagining that he's received these and that he's curious. So I'm going to send them off to a lab. What I find, I mean, I guess I'm trying to say I can understand why he would do that, just out of curiosity from, a chemical perspective. What really gets me is how USONA published this material that, I mean, they could have gone to the church and said, hey, we analyze what we think is a sample from your church. We don't have chain of custody evidence, so we can't prove that it came from you guys, but we think it did. could we maybe collaborate together to try and see if we can find what's in there? Like they could have taken a non-adversarial approach. They could have taken a very different approach. But it seemed like they wanted to go for something that would make a large controversial public splash by presenting this information and claiming that it's a fiction. So really jumping, in my opinion, sort of the scientific gun, and also just jumping the gun of being polite of, hey, we think maybe it's not there. Can we collaborate and maybe do an analysis? Can you officially send us a sample? That's
what I was hoping, more of those types of potential, and of course being authorized, collaborations.
But they chose a very different approach. And that's what became the story, is the approach that they did. So what impact did that have on the church?
The church was doing well, and we had a regular revenue rate that was going on for about 5 months. And it just killed us. And it's been the hardest thing I've ever had to, deal with in my entire life. And because what they did is they did a false negative. They said, "Oh, we looked for your stuff and couldn't find it in there." But that's different, right? They didn't disprove that it wasn't in there. They just couldn't find it. I mean, I can do that. You can do that with anything, right? I'm just saying, you can be like, I tried to find that thing they said in there. I wasn't able to, so they must be lying. And so they didn't. Yeah, they didn't publish any of the other tests that they did. Right? They didn't put it in a peer review. There was no collaboration. There was no, further testing. So it just showed, especially with their alignment with our entheogenesis event, they wanted to create one narrative, which was just to dismiss us in one shot. They wanted to do a sniper kill, one shot, one kill, and be done. And they did not do their research, and they didn't know who they were messing with. And they made a big mistake. And now they're paying for it, and it's going to be bad for them.
So in the time period since then, especially after the material was released around Adam's analysis, again from a couple of years ago, have you guys ever heard from USANA? Have they made any kind of statement?
Oh, wow.
Have they made any attempt at a reanalysis or a confirmation or a disconfirmation or the kind of... Like, I don't track USANA. I don't know what they do or don't do, but I'm just curious if you have any information there about what has been their response. And even with this latest data, have they responded at all?
Yeah. So the only way I see their responses is what they post online. And the only thing I know other than their fungi fiction, right, is that Alexander Sherwood, a.k.a. on Reddit, Elemental Alex, a.k.a. described himself as Alex S. here, on the Psilomethoxin thread that I posted where I said it was real. And he went on to describe how he tried to synthesize it and it was unstable and he wasn't able to, right, in his lab. So he's saying he couldn't make it. And at the same time, these are the people that have a published journal article where they've made 4-hydroxy-5-MeDMT, no oxygen in there. So they made this molecule, just take out, I should maybe turn it that way for people, the 5-MeO, right? Just take out the oxygen and just do that. So they have a molecule that that does a mouse head twitch that's 4-hydroxy-5-MeDMT, no oxygen. So maybe that's why they care about Psilomethoxin.
As like a competing molecule?
Exactly. It's only one oxygen different. It's hilarious. They're playing, you know what? But it's 5-HT2A. That's what that's where they're playing. You see, so are there IP attorney discussions going on around this? I would imagine so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they know what they're doing. There's no accident about any of this stuff. It's all very, very calculated. And the fact that you go on Reddit and put Elemental Alex and Alex S and criticize the church and you basically say, "Hey, I'm USANA," without putting in the words USANA, that's just lame, man. That's just lame. If you got the truth, stand up and share it. But putting reprints on ChemRx and doing stuff like that is just super lame. Yeah.
Well, so from not having been on any of these threads or anything like that, I would just say that sounds like there's a lack of transparency and a lack of disclosure at the very least that's going on.
Well, that's what this lawsuit is going to be able. These lawsuits can be part of exactly because you know we have some insider reports about shenanigans at USONA related to our molecule. We'd certainly love to find out in discovery. So yeah, total lack of transparency, and people deserve to know if they're going to come out using their, you know, using Bill Linton, using Promega, using USONA, right? The chief marketing officer of USONA now, right, works for the FDA. Yeah, they need to have way more transparency for the American public to have any reason to listen to them.
So I know that there was an earlier court case, and so this is something that, I mean, let's just be clear, in the psychedelic community and psychedelic world, this is something that is definitely, I guess I'd just say, it hasn't been well received. The idea that this church is going to sue a research institute or sue people or take them to court, and it's in response to the damage that was done reputationally to the church. And some people like to just kind of say, oh, they just like to sue people. They just, just presenting it all in a very negative light. But you and I both know that there are claims and accusations that get made in the psychedelic world that can be unfounded or unjust or not representational of the facts, and that people's lives gets damaged through this. And so the court system, that's a way to remedy that. Now, I know that there was an earlier court case after Adam's research. What became of that? And is this a continuation of that that is now under works, or is this a different tact? Just fill us in, like what is going on? What happened? What's going on now?
So the first case was a defamation case because we could prove that claim that they were defaming us by their publication. And we sued them in Texas court, not Texas business court, but just regular Texas court. And you have pretrial motions that you're allowed to file in Texas. One of those pretrial motions, we can thank former Governor Rick Perry, and then former cabinet member, Ibogaine advocate, who created this anti-SLAPP lawsuit, which is protecting Texas residents and corporations from unfounded out-of-state First Amendment attacks. So they used the anti-SLAPP and got the judge to agree to their motion. And so this is, again, pre-trial motion. So it just been kicked up on appeal on this anti-SLAPP. So if we gave the judge in that case, the judges at the appellate level, this new data, they could immediately do a remand, which would just bring it back down to the district court, where we could just basically continue going forward as if nothing had yet happened. So the defamation case is 100% still alive. It's just a pretrial motion at the appellate level. So, but basically everyone admitted those hearings that if we could prove Psilomethoxin was in there, we had a case and we had the ultimate defense. The ultimate, value to our claim, to our positive claim, right? Yeah. That we were defamed. So.
Right. So, but at that time, Adam's research was not considered sufficient evidence.
No, yeah, exactly. So no NMR yet there, right? And what Jesse Himes had produced was being able to measure more at that same remeasure at that same 235.15 level with these other different company machines, right? Lower resolution machines. And it wasn't until he got this higher resolution, like I said, that you could categorically get down to these three molecules and actually be able to figure it out. So,
okay. So that case is still potentially there. And
yes.
Now, there's a new case?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is that?
We're so lawsuit happy, I couldn't help myself. Now, how that came about, the defamation case is about getting, justice for our reputation and the economic impact of that, and how it's really negatively affected our lives. And so, in the depth of doing all this research, after I got the final confirmation I needed for Psilomethoxin, I'm like, okay, and then I went deep enough with figuring out Hamilton and USONA and those other players' responsibility that I'm like, when you get up to it was up to the criminal level, okay? So like, right, the civil level, it's a preponderance of the evidence. Kind of like Shogun said, 50-50, that's the preponderance of the evidence. You have to have at least, a little bit more, 51-49.
Yeah.
For criminal, you need to have like 95, 98%, because that's beyond a reasonable doubt. So when I put all this data together, I'm like, wow, Psilomethoxin is in here, so beyond a reasonable doubt. And the pathway through which it was obtained was unauthorized, and you have USONA has this one molecule different substance they're trying to make. And so basically, and then Sherwood's going on Reddit saying Psilomethoxin's too unstable to make. And so I realized, around maybe Christmas time, beginning of the year, I said, wow, they stole our trade secret. Hamilton Morris unauthorized transferred a sample of a prototype of Psilomethoxin in a biological matrix, just like that's what Maria Sabina gave to Albert Hoffman, okay? So they could do what? Synthesize it, figure it all out, because he said I couldn't do it in the lab. So I'm like, this is trade secret theft. And I was involved in the United States' biggest trade secret case. So I have the background in this, which was the Cadence Avanti electronic design automation lawsuit, where people worked at Cadence, stole software, and formed Avanti and competed against them. And in one perspective of that competition, we were the number 2 player, Silicon Valley Research, where my brother was the CEO and I was the general counsel. So I already had a background in that. And I'm like, this is a trade secret violation. This is criminal behavior. And trade secrets is unique because it can be both civil or criminal if you get to the highest level. So I'm like, we need to file a trade secret suit. Yeah. And then when I provided all that evidence to our, outside counsel who's doing our defamation, he's like, yeah. And that guy's board certified in labor and employment law. Only 3% of attorneys in Texas are board certified, that level of specialization. And he's working on his board specialization for litigation. So, yeah. And he is Blake's best friend from law school.
So this has been, it's already been filed. So this is.
Yeah. So that's how So we in the first suit, Hamilton he went to Japan. We weren't able to serve him yet in the defamation suit, which we still can. And so for this trade secret suit, we had to meet the 3-year statute of limitation deadline from the filing of the Fungi Fiction article. So April 12th, I think, around there. So anyway, so we went to the Bicycle Day event in Asheville, North Carolina, that Hamilton was at. I drove to Alabama, and then I went, went from there up to North Carolina. And the first person supposed to serve him walked in at 9:30 before the thing opened, like, I'm going to serve Hamilton Morris. And the person's like, no, you're not, and that person got kicked out. And so then we found someone else on the fly. She was super slick, walked into the green room at lunchtime, served him out of there. So, yeah, so we served him, and we're still in the process of serving the same parties, USONA et al., in our trade secret lawsuit, because Hamilton unauthorized, like I said, the transfer prototype of our Psilomethoxin biological matrix sample to USONA to figure out how to make Psilomethoxin themselves and to also help their development of their 4-hydroxy-5-ME DMT drug candidate that they're developing.
So at this point, with people having been served, would the church consider that there's a way for Hamilton or USONA to remedy this situation before going to trial?
Yeah, totally. That's what we'd prefer. We'd prefer to settle.
So what would that be?
Settling it? Well, first off, okay, so Hamilton Morris, to get a little bit of the legal technical stuff, he's filed a motion to dismiss and a motion for summary judgment, independent of those other parties. So we have to respond to that. So we have a motion ourselves. We have a response to his motion, right, that we've drafted. And then we have our own motion for summary judgment that we've drafted. And okay, we're going to have a little legal class on motions for summary judgment. And this is why they didn't do their homework, because I worked at a law firm for a year and a half. I was in law school, an IP doing both litigation and what's called prosecution, which is the more administrative side in both trademarks and patents. And so, and I've got, trade secrets, whatever. I've got a background in this. I wrote over 40 motions for summary judgment when I was at my law firm. That's what they had me do. That's what you do in a lawsuit is, if you have a good enough case on either side of it, you make a motion for summary judgment and say, I'm going to get a decision before having to spend all this time, money, and all the discovery and, to go to trial, right? And so they said, your question is, we want to settle, but how both sides use these motions is to push the others into some sort of like, either they want us to lose and we want to win enough in our motions where we can force them to settle before going to trial. Yeah. So yeah, the solution is they give us money. Yeah. That's the way they can fix it and we can get justice. And yeah, we're using those motions. So, okay. A motion for summary judgment can be granted on either side when there's no material dispute of fact, and you give all the facts interpretation to the side that you're moving against. Does that make sense? In other words, the other side gets the deference. So we get all the best perspective. So there's no way their motion for summary judgment Hamilton's motion for summary judgment is going to get anywhere. It says stuff like Psilomethoxin is a Schedule I drug. That's not true. It's not true.
What would that matter anyway?
You can't have a material fact that's incorrect to you in a motion for summary judgment that's granted by the court. But basically, yeah.
But I'm saying, why would that even be an argument about calling it a Schedule I drug? Why would that impact their court case?
Okay, so in a motion for summary judgment that they want the court to approve against us, they have to 100% have no material facts that are in dispute or that are incorrect in their motion. They said Psilomethoxin is a Schedule I drug. It's not.
Right. But so I'm asking, like, what's their motivation for saying that? Like, I don't get.
Oh, why would you do that?
Yeah, why would they make such a stupid mistake as saying that it's a Schedule I drug when it's not? And how would that benefit them in a court case?
Okay, first off, it's their attorney. You know what I mean? Like, and their attorney is a friend of mine, by the way, who represented us in the world's biggest in the United States' biggest trade secret case. Is that funny? I asked him if he had interest in our case in January, except now it's totally cool. He's a cool dude. He's working for Hamilton. My personal opinion, he didn't write it. His paralegal did. It's a shitty argument. It's not very good, but there's no cost in a motion for summary judgment to throwing the whole kitchen sink in there, except from tactical and strategical approaches where you're giving up too early, allowing yourself to be killed too early, telling other people how you're going to argue, how you're going to go to court, what your arguments are going to be, and setting yourself up to get your whole argument tanked by the motion for summary judgment. It's going to come from us, especially when he hasn't coordinated with all the other parties. And so now he's going first, and that's what we'd rather have. Yeah, divide and conquer. So I'm really happy that Hamilton threw out his motion to dismiss and motion for summary judgment because they suck.
Yeah, I guess I'm just very confused about why they would enter that into the court record to try and claim that Psilomethoxin is a Schedule I drug and how they think that would help their case against you guys. It doesn't make sense.
They're trying to say we're illegal. You know what I mean? They're saying things like it's Schedule I. It's illegal, but they're not recognizing any of our RFRA claims or so. I don't know, Martin. I really don't know. I can only tell you that it's poor. You know what I mean? I can only tell you that it sucks. As independently as my own opinion, but I don't know. Other than you pour the kitchen sink in there, but if you're trying to win, you don't put the kitchen sink in there. You put the things that are going to win. So I don't know either. They try to make an analog argument. It's irrelevant because an analog argument, is a matter of material fact that has to be determined in a court of law that can't be determined by a judge at a motion for summary judgment.
Right. So they can't just say, well, this is similar to something else, therefore it's illegal. But I'm still just perplexed of why they would take that route, because the Church of the Sacred Synthesis is an entheogenic church, which is claiming exemption from
Okay.
federal drug
Yeah.
laws in order to serve its religious sacraments. So even if it were
Yeah.
Schedule 1, that
Yes.
doesn't obviate the religious freedom claims.
That's what tells you they don't know that stuff. That's
Yeah.
what you see. The answer to your question is why would they say that? Because they don't understand and know that. And I'm not talking about my friend because you know what I mean? Like, but I don't know if he knows that or not, but that, you know, he's a really good first amendment attorney and does all sorts of different kinds of stuff. But whoever wrote it doesn't know that, or whoever wrote it didn't do a complete job of research, because they would have said, asked AI, is there any scenario where I can have a Schedule 1 drug and there might be some kind of protection for me? And they'd be like, oh, dude, well, there's this thing called RFRA and entheogenic churches, and hey, this thing called the First Amendment. Yeah. So
I mean, that's
yeah.
the entire
Amateur.
Yeah, it's the entire basis for the claim of religious freedom for entheogenic churches. I mean, that's the foundation of the law, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and particularly the Native American Religious Freedom Restoration Act addressed exactly this issue. Can you have a Schedule 1 illegal drug but make an exemption in the law for it to be served as a religious sacrament? That's the purpose of the law.
Amen. RFRA, authored by Senator Benouis, God bless him, Medal of Honor winner, who nominated me to go to West Point. Yeah. So.
All right, so that's just a mysterious tack that they decided to take with this. Okay, so I don't know if there's more that we need to say about the court cases for now, but it's underway. It's happening. Yeah. This is in defense of the reputation of the Church of the Sacred Synthesis and the material evidence provided that there is scientific confirmation that psilomethoxin is real. It is present inside these mushrooms. This is not a fraud. This is not some kind of con. This is not ketamine. This is not anything else. It is psilomethoxin.
Yes.
And people who have claimed otherwise have defamed the church and also have perhaps had other motives for why they would want to do that. And so that's something that might come out in discovery in the current case.
Exactly. Okay. And for the people who like the story part of it, you know, and from the time Hamilton filed his motion, which was a couple of weeks ago, the court has to have a hearing, which we already had our scheduling hearing about that within like 60 days. Now, that's more for the court. Now, you just have to submit your response. We have to submit our response, right, before that 60 days. That's all we have to do. So could that be delayed a little bit from the court scheduling? Yes, because of their scheduling, but we just have to have our stuff's already done. Our attorneys already got the final drafts of our response and our own motion for summary judgment, which we don't have to do one, by the way, right? You get that. It's a completely voluntary thing. That's why they hired a guy like me to be a law clerk and like, hey, dude, for these cases where our plaintiff or defendant is on the good side of this, write us a motion for summary judgment, and some of those they'll get approved, right? And there's no real extra cost to do it. But if you don't do it right, you can mess your whole stuff up and mess other parties' stuff up and mess your chances to have the flow that you wanted for the court process and cost yourself a bunch more money potentially. So,
okay, so maybe let's talk a little bit now about the church. And so this is another aspect that some people seem to feel is controversial or is improper, where the Church of the Sacred Synthesis is a membership-based organization, as are many entheogenic churches in the United States. And, for those who don't listen to the podcast regularly, because, I've had a lot of guests on about entheogenic churches and things like that this is still a developing area of American culture and society and legal precedent and law. So this is all under construction at the moment. But many entheogenic churches do have a fee-based membership, which then gets you access to purchase sacrament as made available through the church. And this is because, for one, sacraments aren't free, right? Somebody has to produce them. And in the case of the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, you guys have a specific biosynthetic production process, I should say biosynthesis, not biosynthetic, but biosynthesis production process. So this is something that the church needs an income in order to continue to produce the sacrament. So some people criticize the church and saying, "Oh, you guys are just in it for the money. You just want to sell sacrament," and that the evidence is that you're selling sacrament, not really recognizing the financial requirements of the production. So I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to that issue first of all, and then a couple more things I would like to ask you about.
Yeah, I mean, like you just said, that's just the basic mechanics. Nothing, you can't do stuff for free, and we have to engage in extra expenses, as it were, to make sure we can protect our members. I mean, that's my personal belief. I'm not trying to do this and say, hey, just risk your whole life by joining our church. So that's really become, besides obviously just the cost of producing the mushrooms, that becomes really a lot of the overhead, right? Is doing all those things to protect yourself, and some of those are really important and you should be doing anyway and good to do. And sorry for shaking the camera there. And things like harm reduction. So we're trying to leverage that sort of Colorado, right, Natural Medicine Health Act model of just like really building harm reduction into our stuff. So it costs money to develop those things. It costs money to offer those kind of programs. And are they important and necessary? Should be done there? Yes. But the giving it away, I mean, whatever. I've given people medicine, but this is the church. This is like, how big is the Zydor Church? How big is Dave Hodges' Zydor Church? Is like 200,000 members.
Yeah,
you can't give people mushrooms for free. It's too big. So if you're looking to be successful, you're going to have classes and microdoses and retreats and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, you're going to have to spend money. And after entheogenesis, we wanted to be able to do more of those kinds of things, right? It would be regular to be like on a sort of festival schedule. But
this is a place where I think the Church's Sacred Synthesis, I feel like it's kind of been singled out. And it's from this fungi fiction original publication from USONA, but kind of singled out as like, oh, these people are looking to sell sacrament and make money. But again, other than the Native American Church, which, I've gone to a few Native American church ceremonies, which has been around for a long time, that is not a membership-based organization. They're not asking for fees. But like when I went to the Santo Daime Church here in Ashland, which had their groundbreaking federal court case of defending their religious freedom in 2009 to drink ayahuasca /daime, it was standard that you make I think it was $150. It's been a number of years, but I think it was the standard was you give $150 contribution for every ceremony that you come to. That was just the standard. So this is how entheogenic churches operate in the United States. There's nothing unique. There's absolutely nothing unique about the Church of the Sacred Synthesis in that way, other than that you guys do have a website and that your members can sign up and they can order from the website. I don't know if the Church of Ambrosia, if they have a website where people can order, if they have to go in person. I think they might have an in-person shop, which I don't think the Church of the Sacred Synthesis has. But again, this is standard that when you go to an entheogenic ceremony at these different churches, you make a financial contribution or you pay up front as a member for a yearly membership.
Like regular churches.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so ultimately entheogenic churches are not just like regular churches, except they've got this Schedule I potential consideration that they're dealing with. Yeah. So, and those people, you pay the membership to the church and then you add extra money in when you go to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, again, the Church of the Sacred Synthesis has been unfairly, I think, highlighted as, oh, you guys are selling sacrament. Therefore, you're just capitalists hiding, behind this religious freedom thing.
Real quick, those people just haven't done their homework because Greg and I build more entheogenic churches than anyone else in the entire United States.
Yeah.
So So these people don't know entheogenic churches. So they're making critiques based on stuff that they don't have expertise in, that's okay. But then they haven't done enough research at all, and they're just like dismissive, and you guys are a bunch of cult freak. It's like like whatever stuff they want to throw at you. So
Yeah. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about, so we're going to move on to a slightly different topic, but it's still on the topic of psychedelic sacraments that
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think it was maybe a couple years ago now, but correct me on the timeline, where Church of the Sacred Synthesis started to make available the Jaguar wand, the low dose
Yeah,
5-MeO
yeah.
vape, and then also the nasal spray. So I'm very curious, what was the conversation around that in terms of introducing a different, related but different sacrament in a different form of actual 5-MeO DMT, not 4-HO 5-MeO DMT, which is the
Yeah,
Psilomethoxin. So, what was the conversation around that? The idea
yeah,
of making these additional modalities of sacrament available.
yeah. It was born out of the MAPS conference, right? And the launch then of that Natural Medicines Health Act. So we're in Colorado, you're on the ground, right? Feeling the difference of the law and what the law allows, right? For your behavior. And yeah, we just realized that, yeah, obviously we're big believers in 5-MeO. 5-MeO came before Psilomethoxin in the evolution of our church. And so we never said, oh, because Psilomethoxin's smooth and cool and long lasting and slower and stretched out, that we don't like 5-MeO. Like, it's still part of the same thing. How do we get these 5-MeO experiences that are maybe, more embodied meditation rather than that first time you went and did Toad or 5-MeO or first couple times, right? And now maybe you want to be working with it, right, over some kind of period of time. So we felt the time was right, and the place was right to be able to leverage Colorado to launch doing that from there. And to be frank, yeah, what would be a clean way to say it? Yeah, we needed God's help in staying alive and keeping the lights on. So it certainly makes a difference there. But in that way, it's more of yeah, still having to deal with the ramifications of being attacked and then make decisions on what you're going to be doing. But yeah, I mean, I'm super stoked about it. I'm a big believer in the light wands and the Unity Mist. And I just want to say, like, the Unity Mist are super cool because the nasal mucosa is self-limiting. So you can really only get at the right dosage about 6 milligrams in your nose anyway, max. So that's like a really good thing. And then with the pens, as you well know, you can really dial in those strengths and amounts and just pull on it for a second. So you can really titrate your dose incredibly. And I think that's when people can then be masters themselves of working with the medicine, right? Rather than the upfront part, when you go all the way, you need someone else, to give it to you. So yeah, I mean, you can. I don't know if that answers your question enough, or
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize that these delivery methods for 5-MeO, these are not full release doses, right?
yeah, exactly.
These are low dose experiences,
Yeah,
which
which
are
fits more into the Psilomethoxin kind of approach
right,
and where we've been going with the
right,
yeah.
and then also potentially fits I guess I would call it the community model from what I'm
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to observe
yeah,
from the Church of the Sacred Synthesis, where
yeah.
people are
Thank you.
invited to gather
Thank you.
online to
Thank you.
experience sachement together.
And in person. And we've done some of
Okay,
those
so
hybrid in person. The very first one we did it in Colorado at a church, at an entheogenic church. Austin Mao. Thank you very much. Yeah, so right, that was a great way to launch. And then we were able to at the same time, share it online so people could play along, play with us at the same time. So yeah.
yeah, so then just how would you describe the community model for the Church of the Sacred Synthesis at this point? Like, so when people join, I mean, you could just join and you can order and you could do it on your own, or
Yeah.
you could take part in the community. So what are those potentials for community, and what kind of things do the church offer for members as
Sure.
member events?
Sure. One of the first things we've been doing, and I was pleasantly surprised I didn't invent the term microdose. Paul F. Austin, I think, gets the best credit. Yeah, we had a microdosing group with the church. Yeah, for gosh, 4 or 5 years. And so that's been a regular once a week get together. Mostly in the past Friday mornings, we shifted it to the weekends now to accommodate more people, and maybe even sometimes do 2 different days. But meet in the morning by 8, step off by 8:30, walk a couple miles, 3 to 4 to 5, 6 miles, depending. If it's summertime, we get in the water after, and then go grab some lunch. And of course, there's no requirement to take anything other than nature. And if someone said, "Oh, I'd love some Psilomethoxin," share that with them. Or if they're like, "Oh, yeah, I brought my own, mushrooms or whatever, Santa Maria cannabis." So basically, yeah, microdosing, hyperdosing, and so things like that. And that's been going on continuously. And then beyond that, we have in-person events where, people are taking our medicine, right, online in congregation. And that way, I guess, pure online. I mean, people are physically located in their different spaces, and they might be gathering. But it's purely online. And then we've been doing in-person events, which some can also be hybrid, where people are also externally participating. And it's really just all the community stuff. It's just all the standard entheogenic church community infrastructure, information, harm reduction, learning all the different techniques for self-regulation, community platforms for people to be able to, be sharing around our sacraments or any other entheogenic sacraments. So again, plain vanilla from an entheogenic church standpoint, but utilizing just all the different technologies and platforms to create planetary-wide community. And by the way, when we first launched, we had a lot of people around the world, but it just the sacrament, as far as, if someone happened to pay $600 to get our sacrament in some other country for tariffs, wasn't working. But we had, we've got members all around the world. So
yeah, with these online community events, does that follow a regular monthly calendar or schedule?
Those are questions that I'm less sophisticated on, that are better for Ben and Cynthia. But I know they're regular. We have stuff every month going on, besides these weekly hikes. But and that just gets more developed, of course, as more people come online. And really, we're very member driven. We get lots of feedback from our members on what they're looking for. And I think more than anything, people are looking for harm reduction and community together, where they're like, I can take stuff, I'm not going to hurt myself, and I can talk to other people who can help me, and they share how they use stuff. And then I can enjoy that experience, right, of being together with other human beings and be like, wow, man, even though we're not in the same place, whatever, I'm connected. And it's a lot more fun than a Zoom meeting, that's for sure. I'm just...
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, a business, like a corporate Zoom meeting. That's all.
Right. So. I got you. Gotcha. All right. Well, I think we've talked it all out here today, Ian.
Wow.
I'm glad you came back on the show so we can talk about all of this. And, I would like to see a psychedelic world and community where people were more willing to talk to each other than... just try and create controversy and
sell newspapers, dude.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that's not really the world that we live in right now. But I appreciate what the Church of the Sacred Synthesis has offered. I still stand by my original assessment that there's something really different here, that this is 5-MeO in edible form. And I'm glad to hear that the science is also confirming that. And I hope that maybe third parties can make their own confirmation, and hopefully just the defamation and all the hating can be put to rest at some point. I hope.
Amen. I've got a little bonus for you, Martine.
Oh yeah.
This is a cool completion of the story, and I will send it to you. Oh, that's super cool. I put it and it disappears. Okay, here we go. Can you see that? Let me put it in front of myself. It says Toad PM. This is Bufo Toad Psilomethoxin. Bufo exudate fed Psilomethoxin.
Wow.
You know what it also contains in there besides Psilomethoxin?
No.
6-hydroxy and 7-hydroxy 5-MeO DMT, because the toad makes that.
Yeah.
So, Jesse's able to test this. This will be 100% definitive without NMR.
Oh,
because of those other toad alkaloids that are already in there. So he already has this.
So you could make the comparison. Yeah.
You can make the comparison in the same stuff. Because then the retention times become determinative as well, because they're all in the same batch. And then you can sequence them as far as how they go through. But it looks like what it makes is 80% psilomethoxin and about 13% of the ortho, and then 7% of the meta. So it's entourage effect. So you got an 80% psilomethoxin and then a 20% of those other ones. And it feels like those are more kind of like body, somatic, emotional. So yeah, I mean, I've already shared it a bunch. So I'll send you some of this as a recognized and appreciated godfather and supreme bioassay Eucharister. Yeah. So anyway, but that's the more stuff I want to leave on. Is I wanted to start a citizen science revolution. I wanted people to start going down to GNC and buying a bunch of stuff and pour it into their mushroom substrate. And I didn't want to get into, lawsuits and all this other stuff. I wanted to collaborate with a lot of other people. And I wasn't thinking when I busted out psilomethoxin that there's going to be somebody out there that's like, psilomethoxin? That's way too close to my 5-ME DMT drug candidate that I'm making. So, but I learned, I learned the hard way. But I have no regrets.
Yeah. All right. Well, go science. Go science. It's been a pleasure to have you on again, Ian. I'm sure it'll happen again. And
awesome.
Hopefully at some point in the future, all the crap will be behind us.
Amen. I look forward to that. And I look forward to having you at our next Ethnogenesis, which these days probably 2027. Yeah, that would be. So.
All right. Well, I'd love to participate again.
All right. Thank you, brother.
All right.
Peace.